Hello, this is Mrs. Gerrans or Carolyn, whichever you care to call me, saying hello again from PCN and from the porch of my house, my front porch. And I don't know where you are, if you're in your front room or your family room or in your car or wherever you are watching this. It's hard to say anymore, but one thing we do know is I'll bet your neighborhood is just about as quiet as mine because we're not out playing with neighbors and we're not out going to parks and playing with friends. We're staying home almost all the time still, aren't we? Well, it's kind of interesting that today's lesson has a lot to do with home and how important home is. So I will tell you that it is from the Old Testament, which is the part of the Bible that was written before Jesus was born. And it is from a book called Second Kings, chapter 4 and verses 8 through 13. So if it's okay with you, we will start right off and talk about the importance of trusting God and having a place that we feel sheltered and where we know love. Okay? And suddenly we find ourselves again in ancient Palestine. Remember, we were in ancient Palestine last week, but we were there during Jesus' time, when Jesus was there with his disciples. This time, our story begins before Jesus' birth, and we are in an even more ancient Palestine, near a town called Shuman. Our story today is about a prophet named Elijah, who traveled from place to place, spreading the word of God, telling people how much God loved them, how God would take care of them, how they should show God's love by trying to take care of each other, and all the things like that. He did a very good job. He got a lot of listeners in town after town after town, and he would make sort of a circle, and then he would come back around and he would talk to the same people again. Then he'd go to another town, and he was always making kind of a circuit. And two of these people in a town named Shuman became very, very fond of him. The Bible doesn't tell us their names, but it says that they were a man and wife, and that the wife at one point said, we should do something for Elisha. What if we just invite him to dinner? Don't you think he would enjoy that? And so they did. They invited him to dinner, and he was quite thrilled because it takes a lot of energy to walk from town to town to town, and so he could really use a good meal. As you can see, he doesn't have a backpack. They hadn't invented backpacks yet, and he was too poor to have a donkey, so he had nowhere to really carry his provisions. He needed the love of God to come down through the people and help him. And that's what this couple was doing by inviting him to dinner. So let's see what dinner looks like at their house. Imagine how thrilled Elisha was when he walked into the man and woman's house. It was just a house, but it had everything that makes a house a home. It had two loving people living there. It had a cook stove in the corner with a warm fire and braised meats that you could smell as soon as you walked in the door. It had fresh fruit on the table ready to be eaten, and 3 glasses of wine or grape juice that they could enjoy with their dinner. It had pretty windows to look out of. It had 2 beds for sleeping. Because, again, this wasn't a fancy house. It was a home with places to sleep, places to rest, food to eat, and people to love you. And that's what really makes a home. You got to have those people to love you to change a house into a home. And also here on the end of this bed, whoop, I forgot something. Who's peeking their head out in the corner? Can you see them? The sheep and the goats. Now, were these pets? No, not exactly. Because in ancient Palestine, most people who could afford to have the sheep and the goats to milk them and make cheeses or to slaughter them when they got old and then they could eat the meat. They didn't have room to have an extra barn, like we would think that something like that would go in a barn. But no, the animals that they needed for food were usually kept right in the same room where they were. So you might have goats and sheep pretty close to where you slept and where you ate and where you cooked, because that's how ancient Palestine was. It wasn't a very fancy place except for the very, very, very wealthy people. But these things that they had were important, and one of their prized possessions would have been their scrolls, which are these lying on the foot of the bed. Now, scrolls are what we would call books, because they didn't have books like we do, but they had these long rolls of parchment paper. They would write important information on them and then roll them up. And that's what they would read when they wanted to learn something. And that's also how Elisha thanked the couple. He thanked the couple by reading from the scroll, reading from the Testament Bible, which they call the Torah, and then he could teach them even more than they learned when they were with him with the other people. So he always kept teaching, and they always kept listening. And as they talked together, Elisha was teaching them that the more they gave, the more they received. And they were actually teaching Elisha something too. They were teaching Elisha that he was right not to worry, that God would take care of him through the people that he knew and the people that he taught. Finally, after a few trips and a few wonderful dinners with his new friends in Shunem, Elijah returned to their house once more, and it was a very familiar home to him now, with a cook stove in the corner and the goats and the sheep sharing their home, the fresh fruit and the wine glasses, the beautiful view out the windows and the comfortable table and the places to sleep and the scrolls to read from. There was something else. Something brand new. A whole new room. The couple had built a room onto their home, a room with a window in it and a rug to keep your feet warm and a comfortable bed, even pillows, and a curtain hanging in the doorway so that they could be private and quiet when you needed it. So that was a big surprise for Elisha, and his friends were smiling at him, and Elisha was very confused. He said, Are you expecting a child? Is that what's happening? Or is your mother or your father moving in with you? That would be very nice. What's going on here? Why the new room? And they told him that they had built the room for him. Specifically for him, whenever he came to their town, this room was to be his room, and he would always have a home with them. He was so grateful and so pleased that he dropped to his knees and thanked God for the love that God had shown him through his friends. Because that's how God does show us his love for us, is through the people we know, through the people who love us. And that is what Elijah experienced that day when his friends built a whole new room for him. So here we are at home again, but in more of a home that we're used to seeing. Maybe we don't have a cook stove in the corner. Maybe we have a pot full of roses to bring the outdoors garden into the house. And instead of a table laden with food, we have a table with chairs to sit on. And we serve things that they didn't have in ancient Palestine, like roast turkey and mashed potatoes and rolls made into bread. And they have a different kind of window now, don't they? If I zero in on here, oh, there we go. Does that look more like a modern window with curtains and everything? And we have probably a place to relax and read, but this time we do have real books, don't we? We don't have to unroll scrolls to do our reading and our learning. And here we have the toys. have dolls, whether it's dolls or airplanes or trucks or wagons. It's important to have toys in a house, because what makes a house a home is the love that's put in. It's the children. They make a house a home. Looks like they're all hungry, huh? And most homes have a mommy and a daddy. And maybe a baby. Not every home is the same, though. What matters is the love that's there. Whoever gives it, maybe it's an aunt who gives the love. Maybe it's grandma and grandpa who gives the love. And speaking of love, some of you might be saying, yeah, but where's the pets? We don't sleep with our goats and our sheep anymore, do we? But some of you might love dogs. Some of you might say, I know the Contrerases would say, well, a house isn't a home without rabbits. And then, of course, there's the snakes and the giraffes. There, they help make a house a home, don't they? No? No, maybe not. Maybe we don't need snakes and giraffes. We'll save them for another story. But that's the important thing to know. The houses may have changed, but homes really haven't, because homes are where the love is. The love of God and the love for each other. And that is what Elisha was trying to teach us all those thousands of years ago. Okay, everybody, that's it for this week, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun to film a little bit of story time for you. And remember, it is springtime, so if we can't go out hunting for poppies, we can always wear them. Enjoy this month. Enjoy your time at home with your families. I know it's a very strange and peculiar spring for all of us, but we have all the love we need from our God, from our family, from our friends. All we have to do is look for it. Enjoy yourselves, and we will close off with our goodbye prayer. Bible, that's the book for me. I stand alone on the word of God, the Bible. Bye, everybody.